Hello, parents. This is Andy Hansen from Hillcrest High School. If you were receiving this video, I have one of your students in my sophomore English class. So, to begin here, all of you should have received a message or an invite to join my Google Classroom as a parent. And how you do that is if you go to googleclassroom.com, you should see an invite pending under the email that you provided the school. And by joining that, you can track what we are doing in class, what your student has or has not completed for me. So it's a nice system for that if you were interested. You can also just look on your student's page to see what they have or haven't done. So just a couple of things here. This trimester we're focusing on persuasion, and our major unit that we're doing is To Kill a Mockingbird, and they will also be doing a paper for me. On top of that, we have some smaller assignments. We have what are called ed puzzles, which is mostly the bulk of their homework. They're not super long videos, but they're just to reinforce and support what we're talking about in class, so they're videos with questions. The other things on here that you can see is we have what's called read theory and no red ink. These are these are exercises that we do in the morning, and they shouldn't really ever have these as homework unless they're not doing them in class or they're absent. And just for these three, one thing that I do is these are a cumulative score, meaning all three of these programs will give me an average based on what we've done. So let's say for No Red Ink, I give an assignment this week and Joey does all of it. So you'd have an A in my power score. On the other hand, if the next week Joey forgets to do it or just skips out on doing it, it would be averaged to 50% because he didn't do the second assignment. So in my power score, it would be an F, even though before it was an A. So it's cumulative, and that's the same for read theory and ed puzzle videos. So if they want to raise those scores, they need to go back and fix those or finish them, whatever the case might be. Okay, let me go to my syllabus quickly. Now, I do everything digitally in my class. I try to avoid printing paper if I can help it. It helps keep things more orderly and nice and saves school money. I did not send a syllabus home with my students to give to you like often teachers do. I'm sending it to you virtually so you can peruse it at your leisure. And assuming that I don't hear back from you after I send this off to you, I'm going to assume that if you do not have questions or concerns, you will not say anything. So if I don't hear from you, I will just assume that you got it. So, all right. So sophomore English, third trimester. Okay. My prep period is first hour. If you need to get a hold of me, you can shoot me those school status messages. The one that I will send this on to you today, you can save for me. You can also shoot me an email. All right. So just to go through a couple of things. Our focus this trimester, as per usual in an English class, we're going to be focusing on language and vocabulary. We have speaking, listening, standard reading literature, which is, in our case, To Kill a Mockingbird, doing some cross-cultural reading on that, or not cultural, but reading nonfiction and fiction pairings. So, and then they will also do writing for me. They'll be having allusion and literary terms, which they will be quizzed on, SAT vocabulary, which they will be quizzed on. So, okay, so the big question. So one of the challenges that we've had as a school, and I'm not blaming the admin, I'm not blaming the district, but there was no policy in place to handle attendance and tardies. Which means that Zoe could come to my class and then miss 10 days, and aside from the material that she misses, there's no consequence for that. Now I know that's been a frustration for many parents. It has been a very big frustration for teachers. I know that there's movements to try to implement something, but as of right now, there is really no plan to that I know of to implement any sort of punishment or dissuade students from this. And this again is a state something from the state, not necessarily from the district. So, as for myself, I have implemented a policy in my own classroom. And this is not a punishment, it is actually a reward system. So, if students meet certain criteria in my classroom, they do not have to take the final in my class. Now, a lot of my students were excited about this. Part of the reason I have implemented this is because I do see a correlation between students being present, whether for the whole day or if they're tardy, and their overall grade in class. Now, a lot of students don't think about that. They just think, oh, I'm going to come back late from lunch with my friends, or I'm going to skip today because I just want to hang out with my girlfriend in the hallways or at Wendy's or something. So there is a correlation between that. A lot of my students who are constantly in that position do have lower grades who don't end up passing. So as an incentive, and I remind them of this, is they have to meet certain criteria, and if they do, they don't have to take a final. Now, for the bulk of my students, this won't be a problem. But just for those few who are kind of towing that line, this is what I've implemented. So, in order to not take my final, they can have no more than 6 absences. Now, that used to be the policy for credit recovery. If you had more than 6 absences, you had to go meet before an attendance committee. And so, in retrospect, that is a full week of the term. That's almost 1/10 of the class that they miss. I'm currently allowed to miss, only a handful of days per year for being sick. And that's understandable. That happens. So how I describe an absence is if a student is marked unverified in the grade book, so meaning they're not excused by you, no one calls in, they just are not in class when they're supposed to be. And then also just a simple excused absence. So if you call and say, hey, Johnny is sick today, or you're calling to take him out for whatever reason, and there's no other indication for that, that is marked as an excused absence. Now, I know that might not seem necessarily fair at the time, but there is absences that I will excuse, and I'll kind of talk more about this too. If they have bereavement, meaning if there's a funeral, I will not count that against them. If they're in with a counselor and they're excused by the counselor, I will not mark that against them. If they have a medically excused absence, so let's say you get a doctor's note, or they have a COVID diagnosis, and there's a slew of other ones on there. The case in point being is, with unverified and unexcused, they're still missing my class. So that is my policy for that. I also have a tardies policy. If they have more than 10 tardies, that would qualify them to take my final. And that doesn't include excused tardies. So if they come in with a note from a teacher, like they were finishing up a test or something, I won't count that against them. I will sometimes go back and change it, because I have had students who come in at the start of class and say, hey, Mr. Hanson, can I use the restroom? And then they disappear for the whole period, or they come back. Now, I get that sometimes, stuff happens and they need to be gone for a long time. But if that becomes a chronic problem, I usually will talk to them and I'll go back and change that to either a tardy or an absence if it's for a very long period of time. But that just kind of is more of a leading to a discussion. And then finally, I do want my students to have a C or better. Like I said, there's a correlation between students being present and their grades. And it's not because they give them a bad grade for not being here, but they just miss stuff. So I do want them to have a C or better in my class. And yeah, that also includes students who are here. I know some students can be here, but not technically be here. So a C or better, and they're excluded from taking the final. And for the bulk of students, that will be fine. That shouldn't be a problem. And again, my rationale for this is I don't know that students learn the material well enough if they're gone incessantly or they're constantly late, because I start right at the bell. And they miss instruction, they miss quizzes. Yeah. So I mostly want them to do the final to show they have mastery over the material, and if I think that they do, then I don't expect them to do it. I will say that my policy is not ironclad. I know that there's going to be exceptions. I know that there's going to be things that will come up, and a student will be like, well, Mr. Hanson, I have 8 absences. But I mean, I currently have a B in your class. I mean, I am doing my work when I'm gone, and that can lead to a discussion and a decision on my part. So that's more or less that. Okay. Let's see. My grades are based. I do them straight A, B, C, D, F. So for instance, in Google Classroom, if I give a student an 18 out of 20, that would be a 90%. I would still put it as an A in the grade book. So, and that would still be 97%. And I've talked to my students about this. So if there's a question at the end, like, well, Mr. Hanson, I got 100% on this, but I only have a 97, we can talk at the end of the try if they think it really affects them. But for the most part, the district recognizes an A as an A. So if they end with a 94 to a 99, that would be considered an A, etc. Okay. Citizenship scores, my classroom rules are pretty straightforward. Yeah, I think I can let you guys review through the rest of this, but those are just kind of the main points I wanted to talk about. I would say please be conscientious. You do want to make sure you have access to PowerSchool so you can see how your students are doing. If you do not currently have that, please call the school and talk to Valerie Whitty. She can help set you up so you can see that. I've learned, and hopefully maybe some of you have too, that students are not always transparent about their grades, or they're not always 100% truthful. So, just please be making sure that you're checking those. Okay, I think that is kind of the bulk of my my video. So if you have questions or concerns, please let me know. I've enjoyed this first week, and I look forward to working with your students the rest of the try. Thanks.